Hello, everyone. As people are trickling in, just before we begin, I just want to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the university stands, and also where I am today, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich people whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Thank you all for being here. My name is Ali Baggett, and I am so excited to be your moderator today. I am a staff member here at UVic, overseeing all of UVic's social and digital media, but I'm also a proud UVic alumna. I graduated in 2011 with my Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry, and I'm also currently an MED grad student right now, so pretty busy for me. But the UVic Alumni Association is pleased to present today's Ask Me Anything with alumna, networking expert, and author Kelly Hoey. But of course, before we get to meet Kelly, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping. As we all know, virtual events can have its challenges. So just a reminder to keep your microphone and video capability turned on, but of course you can mute throughout the event and pop it on when you have a question. We want to see your faces, so please have your video on so we can keep that connectivity and community feeling going as we move through our presentation. And yeah, just keep your microphone off until I call on you to ask your question. I'm sure Kelly would love to hear your voice when you have a question. And if you're having any technical difficulties along the way, or you need some assistance, we have our awesome team on standby at alumtech@uvic.ca. So alumtech@uvic.ca. You can send them a quick email and they'll help you out if you have any technical difficulties. You probably saw the warning when you came in, but this event is being recorded so we can share it with others who weren't able to attend live. And we'll send out a follow-up email with resource links tomorrow. We are going to also use the chat feature for questions during the presentation. So if you have a question for Kelly at any time throughout the presentation, please write it in the chat. And I have some special little elves that will flag them for me to bring up. You can also raise your hand in the Zoom features below. You just have to go to the bottom of the screen for most of you guys, and I'll just call on you to ask your question, or you can still use the chat. Depending on how many questions there are, we may not be able to get through all of them, but we will try our best. We're going to be wrapping up around 1 o'clock, but if you need to leave sooner, no problem. You will get a link to the recording. So without further ado, I am excited to introduce Kelly Hoey. So Kelly graduated from UVic in 1987 with a degree in political science. She then obtained a law degree at UBC and went on to practice law in Toronto until a unique opportunity in 2009 encouraged her to, in Kelly's words, stop playing it safe. Since then, Kelly has worked alongside the visionary leader of a global business network for women, co-founded a startup accelerator, been an angel investor, and held an interim CMO position, reporting to a founder and CEO 20 plus years younger. All of these experiences have been part of her career journey to become a published author and keynote speaker. If you haven't seen it yet, Kelly's book, Build Your Dream Network, Forging Powerful Relationships in a Hyper-Connected World, is meant to help readers cut through the networking noise and start building the powerful, real relationships needed to succeed in our digital world. For being here today, you will all receive a copy of Kelly's book as attendees, and we are so thrilled to have Kelly here to share insights and answer your questions about networking and dreaming big. So without further ado, I will be going straight into turning it over to Kelly. We're going to jump into some of the questions that you have asked before the event in your registration form, and then of course you can continue to ask questions throughout. So use the chat and use the raise your hand feature, and we are going to not take up any more time and throw it over to Kelly.
This is awesome. And I'm hoping, Ali, that what you'll do is bring up the video, bring up the PowerPoint so we can see all of this. And why don't you flip to that next slide, because there we go. I'd love to know who everyone is and why you're here. So, you know, as I think about a Zoom event like this is like if Ali and I were sitting on stage somewhere, you know, let's visualize that, like pretend it's happening, Allie. And I'm looking at all of you out there who are attending in the lecture hall. So I'd love to know who you are and why you're here. We'd love to know. I mean, I'm assuming you're interested too, Allie, not just me.
Yeah, definitely.
And the alumni team, I see Gina's here, like, who is everybody? And what is it about networking? Because you have taken time away from your day to be here. And I'm sure it's not just because, you know, if you're here in person as opposed to watching the video later, you're getting the book. There must be a reason that you wanted to be here today. So share it in the chat and where you are, what is it you're looking to learn, because in doing this, we're going to be able to get more information that, you know, is really pertinent to you. Plus, guess what? You might meet someone else who's got the same challenges, or you may have the answer to somebody else's networking problem, and we're not going to know that unless you all participate there in the chat. So please do. So I know what the first question is, because Ali and I worked on this, you know, PowerPoint together, and I know the first question. So if you want to flip to this, because I can give a little background as we're talking here. So I'll be honest, did I know anything about networking back when it was, you know, 1987? No. I think I thought what networking was and how you do it was sort of the usual schmoozing. You know, when someone said, get out and network, I would probably think, oh, I got to go and talk to a bunch of strangers. In my whole outlook, you know, when I think about it in hindsight, my whole outlook on what networking is and how we can do it differently changed when I became, I would say, graduated from law school and was an articling student in Toronto. And I quickly realized I had chosen to be in a profession that there was two important things I had to do in my job, and there was a fundamental tension. One was, and I did see that someone had put in there, an articling student in Fort McMurray. One part of being a lawyer was, well, you got to do the work, which meant you got to be at your desk, doing the research, billing the hours. The other part to being successful as a lawyer was I needed to build relationships. And if you maintain that mindset of you have to go out and schmooze and meet people, there's a fundamental tension here, and how do you resolve it? Because if you're doing too much schmoozing, you're not billing the hours. If you're doing too much billing the hours, you're not building the relationships. So I sort of sat back and I thought, all right, what other tools do I have to build relationships? And how do I start building relationships so I have the deal flow, the projects, the client relationships that will make me successful in this profession? And so let's go back to 1991, because I can see a few faces of people who are, you know, of my vintage in the alumni network. What did we have back then? We had email, we had voicemail, we had a Palm Pilot. I don't know what other technology we had back then. You know, you have to go to a museum to find it all at this point, I think. But I looked at what, you get my jokes on this. I looked at what the tools I had. So what tools did I have at that time? You know, it was my work product and how I delivered it. It was the emails that I sent to clients. It was remembering details and I'm gonna say personal information, so that when I started a conference call or started a call with a client, I could pick up on something that was before, rather than just diving into the edits to, you know, a prospectus or whatever else. And those little, I like to refer to them as micro networking actions. You know, those little actions building up over time is what builds trust, what builds your reputation, and what builds relationships that last. So when I think of networking, I think of every single human interaction. It's how you reach out to people. It's also the information they find about you. So whether that's your profile on LinkedIn or your profile on the, you know, UVic alumni database, all of this is part of your networking toolkit. And so when you think about networking, if you're still thinking about it in this old school, I need to talk to strangers because they're somehow going to sprinkle magical networking fairy dust on me and, you know, open doors that never happened before, you know, on one chance meeting. If that's what you're thinking networking is, please ditch it. If you need to, write it on a piece of paper and then throw it down the toilet when we finish this recording. But how you network today is you network with everyone. Where do you start networking? With people you already know. How do you network with confidence? By understanding why you're doing it. And we'll jump into a little more on that as we proceed. So should we move to the next question, Allie?
Yeah, just as you're preparing your answers, Kelly, there's a lot of chat in the Zoom chat about sort of career transitions, and I just thought to keep that in the back of your mind as if you can add some tips around people, you know, career shifting or that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely, because I've done that a few times.
There we go. So yeah, this is a really great one. How do you begin networking as an awkward introvert? And I would say just as any introvert, awkward or not, probably.
I didn't edit it. Okay, so you know where you start with networking as an awkward introvert? Seriously, because you're all getting the book. You start here. And why I say that is this book is not just like, oh, this is what Kelly says and does. And yes, I do follow my own networking advice. Because you kind of have to when you write a book on networking. I interviewed a number of people to give me their career stories, whether it was with building a business, whether this was moving up the corporate ladder, whether this was landing a board position. And one of the things I did not ask anyone was their personality type. And then I started to get the answers back. And probably 75% of the people I interviewed are introverts, self-identified introverts. I think in this hyper-connected, busy, you know, and I would have said this before 2020, you know, 24/7 world where we have so many options and so many distractions, people who are more purposeful and considerate and deliberate in their networking actions and their networking outreach are the best network builders. Someone who was an extrovert doesn't mean they necessarily they may have a big network. It doesn't mean they have a depth of relationships. They may not be paying attention to who everybody is. Not in the same way that an introvert does. So if you are an introvert, yes, this book's for you. And yes, extroverts, this book's for you. But as an introvert, you know what? I would say when you get your copy, just jump to page 75. One of my favorite case studies, a guy by the name of Joe Styler. He's at GoDaddy. He's worked his way up from a customer service entry-level role to a very coveted role in the aftermarkets at GoDaddy. He has done that, his networking, being a great manager, his networking, being a great coworker and colleague, mentoring other people. He's also invested in his professional development by sort of looking ahead in terms of what are the skills, what's the professional career development he needs to undertake. And yes, he's had to put himself into very uncomfortable positions in terms of attending industry conferences with people he doesn't know, but he understands why he's attending that particular training or conference because it relates to a very identifiable career goal of his. Joe's case study is amazing. Joe and I met, and let me share this, Allie. Joe and I met this because it's not in the book. I was looking to buy a URL for a prior title of my book, and it was one that was not available, and I'd had to go and look in the aftermarkets. And someone said to me, I know the guy. I mean, everyone, if you live in New York City, everyone's got a guy for something. Like, oh, I got the guy for you. Oh, I know the person, right? So someone said, I know the guy, and they put me in touch with Joe. So Joe's in aftermarkets, and he's all about like buying and selling URLs. He's a salesperson at this point. What do you think his first question was to me when I called him? His very first question was, He did not say, how much do you want to pay? He said to me, what's it for? And I told him, and he said to me, wow, that's really interesting. Let me tell you about my career story and how I networked into this role. And we both, as I like to say, leaned into a conversation. And at the end of sort of this 10-minute preliminary conversation, I said to him, Joe, could you please talk to your managers at GoDaddy?
There we go.
Because you know what, Joe, I got to put you in my book. Please make sure that, you can do this and you get permission from PR to do that. And like I said, even if you're a salesperson, even if you're going to have a sales type role, relationships are everything. And there, for me, between Joe being an introvert, how does he network? He listens and he asks good questions. And I have met Joe once in person. And even though we've had endless emails, phone calls, interviewing him for Build Your Dream Network, I can tell you, he's an introvert and really quite introverted. Not like he is that awkward introvert. And even with someone he knows. So can you find ways to build relationships, to have a very powerful career that does not involve like mindless schmoozing? Absolutely. So there's my answer for introverts and really basically everybody.
I always admire introverts because they're so good at, like you said, listening. And I think that's a huge skill that us extroverts need to work on, just to, let others speak to you and instead of just blabbing on about yourself. Sometimes that's like a really, intrusive way of networking for sure.
Having the gift of the gab. I mean, think about a Thanksgiving or a family dinner or a wedding. I mean, you've probably had this, Ali. I mean, I'm an ambivert, so there isn't it's not like a teeter-totter with personalities, like introverts on one end and extroverts on the other. Ambiverts are in the middle. I think more of us are on that spectrum that way, and I get my energy from other people. So I will display as an extrovert. And you've probably had this, Ali, you get invited to like a gathering or, a wedding or whatever. And then you're the one that people stick at the table with everyone who's really socially awkward. And you're like,
totally.
Right, I have to carry the table, right? Like, don't assume that skill set translates into having a strong, responsive, powerful network for your career.
I love that. I love that scale analogy because you can pull out either end of it in different situations. But on that note, next question is, how do I make sure I am seen and heard?
You know what, this is a perfect follow-up question to the introvert part. How are you seen and heard? Listen, you network with more than your mouth. You network with your eyes and your ears. How are you seen and heard is by watching and observing ways to add value to other people. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room. You don't have to be the flashiest. By watching and observing other people, you will be seen and heard. I want to because I know we'll get more in this later, there's two things I would say. One, in terms of seen and heard, like your reputation, part of networking is your reputation. It's not in the moment of the action. Someone may refer you, someone may recommend you, could be a professor, could be, student services, the career services office, could be someone in alumni who says, oh my gosh, there's another alum. I talked to them this week. Let me see if they can talk to you. What's the first thing we do when someone recommends something to us, like a person or a thing? We friggin' Google it. So you know what? You've got to remember that is part of your networking arsenal. And does that digital footprint align with what you want to be found for and what other people are saying about you? So as part of being seen and heard, know you've got that thing hanging in the background, your digital profile. The other thing in terms of being seen and heard, and you can mark this down, page 59, because I know some people are going to be job searching, and even if whether it's new grad job searching or whether it is career transition job searching, how do you get seen and heard in like a sea of applicants? Or even if you're doing business development, the case study at page 59, Jessica Peltzat-Ulov, her process, her methodology for cold outreach and networking with people she doesn't know via sending her resume and cover letters, brilliant. And yes, she uses the same methodology today. It's a little easier than back in 2003-ish when, social platforms weren't as robust as they are right now. But how she was seen and heard and landed a job on, Madison Avenue when she knew no one. And when I will tell you from personal experience, the job market sucked in New York because it was kind of still the post 9/11 hangover. She got job offers and she was seen and heard. So there's both in terms of thinking about whether you're in person, watch and observe more, and if it's thinking about your digital footprint and realize that is part of your networking and you need to get that aligned with who you are in real life. What else we got, Allie?
All right, so how do I connect with second level connections without looking like I'm just using them to connect with another? And there's been some chat already about sort of people who've been out of the working world and trying to reconnect back with people to get back in the mix, and people just looking for those networks to be able to get some job opportunities. So what advice do you have for this sort of not looking like you're just trying to take advantage of people?
Because you've whether you're new or you've had sort of a lifetime of experiences, and this is also why, Allie, I'd say like the micro networking is so important. How you show up every day. Let's look at this as sort of like a technology question. Think about a password prompt. One of our password prompt reminders, if we forget our password, like the security thing, is like, who's your favorite teacher? Who was your favorite elementary school teacher? I've never seen a password prompt that's like, how much money did you make last year, right? It's about people and how you make people feel, right? So this is why micro networking and thinking about how you interact with people matters. Because in my humble opinion, the lapse of time before you see someone again, like maybe you worked with them 5 years ago, maybe you worked with them 10 years ago, maybe it's been 6 months, unless you've been a total jerk and self-centered as a colleague and a coworker or a volunteer or community service or the unhelpful person in a project or a study group, people are happy to help other people who have helped them. So when you're reaching out, the other thing I would say is, like, first of all, think about your interactions in the past, and if you were the person who was the jerk, we might have to have a remedial networking 101 session. Okay, but I'm going to assume good UVic alums and students that you're not in that category. The second thing is, goes back to, and this is where Jessica's case study again was helpful, like, do the work before you reach out. And this is where having a clarity on where you're going and understanding that maybe someone is an incremental step, like the information or the insights they can give you, or an incremental step to your ultimate goal. So what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. When I had the idea of writing a book, I literally sat there and went, where the heck do I start? And I don't mean with writing it, because I've struggled with that. When I lived in Toronto, Michael Ondaatje's daughter lived next door, and she was always like, do you want to meet my dad? And I'm like, no, I will not be able to speak. Right? So the idea for me of writing is like Margaret Atwood and Michael Ondaatje and Robertson Davies and like Farley Mowat. I'm like, these are writers. So I was already going crazy in my brain, like, how do I write this? But I was like, let's talk logistics. So what I did is I sat down and I thought, what are my questions? Okay, my big goal, I want to write a book. Next question, where do I start? Do I get a publisher or do I self-publish? If I want to get a publisher, how do you start that? Well, how does the publishing industry even work? All right, do I need to get a literary agent? what do you send to a literary? Okay, you can already see a goal starts to become like a grocery list of questions. So maybe this is a good exercise for everyone right now. Like, take a piece of paper, put on it what your goal is. The first column, start writing like specific questions. The second, so we're going to do like 3 columns here. Second column, start thinking about the person or the type of person who can answer that question. So when we get to this question, how do you connect with second level connections? And people are probably going, oh, Lord, Kelly, this is a long answer, right? But in my own example, someone's like, you need to get a literary agent. Okay, how do you meet a literary agent? And someone said to me, when you've got your book proposal together, here's what I can do. And by the way, you're not using me for an introduction to this literary agent, Kelly, because she's fabulous. I'd like to get her more good authors because she'll make more money that way. And by the way, I want to see more women authors get published. So chunk down your goal into specific questions. Think about who you can ask, because a question may be, should I self-publish or should I get a publisher, and what's the difference? You may see someone who you think, God, I'd love to work with them, but what's the real thing, right? You might be like, I want to know how they took their biology degree and became, or in the case of someone I met, how they got a degree in archaeology and became the first blogger for Dell. You can believe it, when I met Lionel Menchaca, I was like, would you please explain that, how that degree led to you being the chief blogger for Dell Computers? Because I'm not seeing the connection. You know, it may have been that I wanted Lionel to hire me, but my first question was, I really want to talk to you about your career path. So have the research done before you reach out, and have a real clarity and understanding on what's the question, what's the core of it that you want to get from someone in terms of information or insights. So Ali, I saw you laughing. Hopefully some of that made sense to folks.
Totally. And I love what you said about micro connections. And for me personally, I always treat every person around me as a potential connection. And so it's sort of that, just like, be kind to everyone, and don't just try and look at everybody for what they can give to you, right? So
and you know, this in terms of feeling like you're using, like, this is really thinking about your value. Like, you may understand why somebody else may give you information or investment or hire you or whatever, but think about the value that you're adding to them, right? In terms of that outreach and really understanding what you bring, because sometimes I find people hesitate, Ali, to reach out. They're like, oh, I feel like I might use them. And I'm like, why are you depriving them of your skill set?
totally.
Reaching out to an intermediary and saying, listen, I see so-and-so's hiring. I see you have a really good connection there. Here are the reasons why I'm interested in talking to them. Here are the reasons why, you know, I know that I am the perfect fit for this role. I've already analyzed this, and I see that there are some things that they're doing wrong. It's what I experienced in my last position. You know, that your intermediary might be like, whoa, my friend, you will solve my friend's problem. You know, and if I know if it's anything like online job applications, you know, some poor hiring manager might just be getting a spreadsheet of like 250 really solid candidates and being told by HR, here you go. Where do you want to start interviewing? And actually having someone who is qualified, who can pop off the page because someone has introduced them through the side door and said, by the way, there's someone you should talk to who meets all your qualifications. That's solving someone else's problem. And that's not using them. And like, that's a good thing. But be prepared for that conversation.
Definitely. Before we move on, Stuart had a great question. Just, you know, besides Toastmasters, are there any other organizations that encourage people to network and break out of their shell? Do you know of any?
Well, you could be doing that now. You have a chat. Right? There's alumni. I mean, this is one of those things. I mean, sometimes we're waiting for, and I love the question, Stuart, and I do have a recommendation in terms of other groups. I think it's looking for the ethos of the group that helps you maybe stretch yourself a little bit. But, you know, we intentionally started today with the slide to ask people to comment. And I intentionally put in the chat, hey, tell us who you are. But think about every time you jump on a Zoom and there's a chat function. Has anyone seen a Zoom event where they've said, please don't use the chat. We just want you to sit quietly. Like, you can do these things, right? Think about being the good guest when you are on, you know, on one of these things and start a conversation. Think about being the good guest when you're using digital platforms and having an exchange with other people. These are all networking rooms. Use them remembering you're connecting with other human beings. And I would say another group that I really like, because their in-person ethos translates to their digital footprint, is Creative Mornings. And it is a global community for, I mean, it originally started off global community for creatives, but it's basically got everybody in it. They have amazing talks. They have amazing field trips. Yes, the founder of it is interviewed in my book, and that's not just why I'm a fan of Creative Mornings. But I have personally experienced their in-person events and their digital events. And the ethos of being like an engine of generosity and helping other people is phenomenal. And so, you know, if there's a global community that you wanted to get involved in and you were like, all right, let me do some networking with some new people, there's a community I would recommend, highly recommend.
Creative Mornings, awesome. Yeah, certainly with COVID, I'm hoping people have been able to find an intermediate way to break out of their shell with the virtual platforms. Certainly the chat feature is a nice way to break out of your shell for sure. Okay, let's move on to this question. How can you use networking to collect information about several potential career options and figure out what is the best for you?
Well, I mean, this is where informational interviews are just so good. But again, you know, like we were talking about before, this is where I would say, hey, what are my possible careers that I'm interested in? Where's the information that I can find and search out online before I ask someone for their time? And I'm kind of pausing on that. You know, network involves time and trust. And part of that time is the time you prepare for a networking meeting, because you're taking somebody else's time by asking them to jump on a call or jump on a Zoom or meet for coffee or whatever else. The more time you put in, you know, considering what it is you really want to talk to them about, that's going to, you know, kind of take the big leap and jump in the trust factor. And your goal with any networking exchange is like to have more than a one and done conversation. You want to, you know, maybe this is a person who can be helpful longer, but the less prepared you are, the more likely they're going to be, well, good luck. And they're going to say, let me know if you need any more help. And they really don't mean it. They're just saying it in that really sarcastic way I just did, right? So if you are someone you want to talk to, maybe there's an alum that someone recommends that you should speak to, like go Google them, go and look them up. Maybe you discover they've got a blog, go and read some of their blog posts. Maybe they've done some interviews. Maybe they've got a profile on their company website. Like, this is like the good stalking on the internet, like not the creepy kind, the good kind of stalking. Like, get all of that, because then you'll have like sort of the background to ask a better question. And I will give you a true question. Someone said to me once, seriously on the Zoom, and I had to do poker face like no one's business. This person said to me, I know I can read a lot about your career online, Kelly, but why don't you tell me about yourself? And I'm thinking to myself, you asked for this meeting, and that's your best first question? Seriously, right? Because if you come with a better question, like someone's gonna be like, oh, they did the work. And when they say, here's where your answer is, or, here's how this happened, when whatever it may be. When they say follow up and let me know how it goes, they actually mean it. And for me, Allie, I think the single biggest networking mistake is the failure to follow up. Okay, jerky first questions are a real big mistake, but the failure to follow up is like massive, because you've now had this really great meeting with someone, and maybe they've given you some information. Maybe they've suggested a course. Maybe they've suggested whatever, a website. Maybe they've suggested some leads. Maybe they've said, hey, you should contact this person, use my name. Circling back, following up, letting them know what you did with the information, the resource, the tool, whatever. That's now what starts to move a relationship from a nice conversation and some useful information. It starts to move it down that pathway and that track towards someone who is a mentor, someone who is truly in your network.
And I guess if they don't necessarily give you exactly what you want in that moment, like say they don't hire you or whatever, it's also creating some of those micro connections as well. So it sets the stage for future conversations, right?
You never know. I had there's a young student recently. I've done some stuff with the Bright Network out of the UK, and there was a student who, this whole notion of following up, and she said to me, Kelly, I took your advice. Well, I applied for an internship, did the customized, Jessica Peltz model of a cover letter, did everything, and then didn't get chosen for the internship. So she kind of had, licked her wounds, had her pity party for a couple of days. And then she reached out to the executive director of the organization where she had applied. And she said, you know what, I'm a student, so I would really, if you have time, and I know this is a massive ask, if you could give me any feedback on my application, and if there's anything I could have done differently to get hired. And then she said it was probably 3 or 4 days later, the executive director reached back out and said, your application was actually perfect. My problem is I got too many applicants. But I'll tell you what, let me keep it on hand. Let me keep you, like, if something changes, I'll let you know. And 3 months later, something did change. And the student was hired. And what was supposed to be a 1 month on internship, well, it's now been 12 months because they've been so happy with the work she's been doing. So that to me is a really good example of a way to follow up. She was lucky. I would say she was fortunate. The executive director wanted to follow up and give advice, but she also prepared herself to be the person someone would want to follow up with because of a very focused and not just like changing some names kind of cover letter. It was very much, here's what you do, here's how my education, and what I'm interested aligns with what your mission is. Here's how my other experience really relates to what you are doing. Here's why I want to do this internship. And that's why she got the call back. So there we are.
I love that, standing out. Okay, really, I see Doris's hand up, but just before that, a question came in about, does it ever make sense to approach a company or person who doesn't have any current employment opportunities?
Yes, but don't approach them with a, hey, if you're ever hiring, or hey, your company looks cool, I'd like to work for you. I'm going to use a true example. Hey, your company looks interesting, and could you meet me for coffee? So maybe you could tell me about some of your projects, and maybe literally someone sent that to a friend of mine during COVID.
Also sounds like a copy and paste email kind of.
Yeah, but first of all, it's the middle of COVID. You've seen a cool company, and all you've done is just take a sort of template. Your company looks cool. I'd like to talk to you about any opportunities that I may be suitable for. My resume is attached. If you could look at my resume and then tell me how no, other way around. Like, reach out to the company and be able to say, hey, I see you do X. I've got a degree in this. I've noticed from trends in the industry, or you know, you may not be hiring right now, but I see that the forecasts for this sector are heading in this direction. This is why my skill set is going to be useful when you need to start hiring, because you may be without, you know, like you take the airline industry right now. Hey, hey, American Airlines, you know, laid off all your flight attendants, and that's why you've canceled all sorts of flights recently. Not my flight recently, so I was lucky, but that's why lots of people had flights canceled a week ago. So you could say, I have been in a customer facing role. This is the things I have done. These are the other things. I would be the perfect, you know, candidate for your, you know, flight attendant, you know, training to bring in new people when you start hiring again. Like, show them that you understand the industry, the sector, like what's happening in that part of the economy, how your experience and your skill set apply to where something is going, as opposed to, hey, your company looks cool. If you're ever hiring, keep my resume on hand. You know, that's going to line their trash can, whether that's a virtual trash can or a physical trash
can. Doris, if you can hear me, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, I can hear you. So actually, I have two questions here. So I really agree, like when you were talking about collecting information. So there is a situation I meet a lot of times. So I find some people on LinkedIn, like they're pretty professional, maybe like CEOs or something, or maybe who work in HR or whatever. When I reach out, like send them messages, some more people are pretty nice, like they do follow up or something, or I follow up with them, but some of them, they never send anything back. But I can see like they read your messages, but they never send anything back to you, or just ask one question. And I sent my answer. Yeah, actually just happened yesterday. So
yeah, so let's stop it. Let's stop just there, Doris. So let's think about this.
Yeah,
you're reaching out to a busy person. You're not the only person reaching out to a busy person. So this is where being so precise as to why they should take time out of their busy day to answer your question from all the other hundreds of employee questions they may be getting, or customer questions they may be getting. And then let's layer on the current economic, let's layer on, they may be homeschooling 3 kids and looking after a sick parent. You've really got to put yourself in the shoes of the other person and think about, you know, I'm a stranger. Why would they want to take my call or my email? How do I make it so that they see that I understand, you know, them? You don't have to explicitly say it. I understand them, that they are appreciative of this. You will find also too, I wanted to say on LinkedIn, yes, you'll see some people may read it, but other people use LinkedIn and use LinkedIn InMail differently. They may not check it as much as other people. They may have another platform that is their preferred mode of communication. They may be getting endless, you know, sales and spam pitches. So this is where being really precise. Let me give you an example of a message from a student that got the attention of one of the most senior executives at Pfizer. And it was some guy I was interviewing on their, I want to say their org chart. There's the CEO, and this guy's like the next level. It was a student who reached out. I forget what she was interested in talking to him about, but she made it, I know parts of this were, it related to drug trials that they were doing at Pfizer relating to a very specific form of cancer. That cancer runs in her family. Because of that, that's why she went to medical school. And that's why she was in particular interested in working at Pfizer, and in particular wanted to know more about the status of those drug trials and the stage that they were at, and wanted to ask this guy some particular questions about. That's how hyper specific. This guy was telling me about it because he was so excited to meet the student for the first time. They had had this email exchange. They were meeting in person for the first time. But when he received this message, he literally called HR and said, please tell me that she is on our short list for internships, because he was so impressed with the outreach. But what she did in the email, she asked him a very specific question. She didn't ask him to, you know, hey, can we get on Zoom and can I talk to you for 15 minutes? She like asked this specific question. And because this email was so thoughtful and planned through, this very senior executive took the time. So you may have written and also I want to say this, Doris, you may have written the most perfect outreach. And the person you reached out to is having a bad day. Maybe the dog died, all right? Maybe they just lost their job. Maybe they got up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe they're just a jerk. So some of this is take a good hard look at the communication you're sending and realize you can get everything perfect. And the other person on the other side, you know what? Like I said, maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they're just an unpleasant personality. So this is the hard part of our networking. We have to deal with other human beings. We're weird. Everything 2020 taught us anything. We're weird, squirrely, difficult, unpredictable, right? So control what you can control. That's what you send out. And, you know, really putting in that work and thinking about, all right, what matters to this other person? What is something I can ask them to start a conversation? So hopefully that helps, Doris.
Thanks, Kelly. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to see if we can get through a couple more slides here. And of course, if you don't get your question answered today, keep putting them in the chat and we will record them and get back to you. So let's just see what's next here. You sort of touched on this, but do you have anything to add? What digital platforms have facilitated the best networking experiences during the pandemic?
I think all these platforms is how you choose to use them. And do you sit back and wait for the platform to serve you, or are you serving the community on the platform? And as I mentioned, I think Creative Mornings is an awesome one because of the way the community interacts, but you're going to get more out of all of these by what you put in.
For sure. Oh, this did come up in the chat quite a bit too. How to maintain networking relationships that last.
You know, this is where you aren't the person who just shows up, you know, like, you know, a 911 call, you know, only when there's emergencies. You know, look and see where you can be of service to other people. Look and see where you can be helpful to them. Look and see, you know, like remember little things. And, you know, hey, Ali, you know this as someone who is so involved with social media. You know, people post blogs, they have podcasts, they do things because they want other people to read them. They want likes, they want shares. That liking, sharing, reposting, that's part of your networking toolkit. I was on an Instagram Live last night with someone I now consider a friend, not in the Facebook sense, but like a real friend. And we met 4 years ago because Kid Chan wrote a book review of my book on Instagram and tagged me. And we've had little banter back and forth on Instagram. Because of Clubhouse, we've been able to talk and I've been able to hear his voice. And last night we did an IG Live. And he is someone that I know when I can get on a plane and go to, you know, Kuala Lumpur, I'm going to be like, kid, right? So remember, like those little things matter and use them as part of your networking toolkit.
Totally. I was in a presentation a couple of weeks ago and one of the guys on it said, yeah, if you want to be on social media, you have to also be social. You can't just scream to the world what you want them to hear. You have to have this two-way engagement. So I totally pick up on what you're saying.
Well, it's almost like I said, you know, like one of my massive pet peeves is like when I'm on like one of these and in the chat, somebody puts, hey, everyone, let's connect on LinkedIn here. And then they put their LinkedIn URL, right? Would you ever go up to someone as your first introduction and say that to their face?
Definitely not.
Look at the person like, who are you, strange alien that I do not know, right? Like, forget it. So why do we do that on social media? Like the first thing we say to someone is, you know, like, hey, do you want to buy my product? Like if you walked up to someone, would you walk up to someone on the street and do that? I mean, maybe if you work in the cosmetic department of the Bay or something, you want to squirt someone with some perfume and get them to buy it. But we start a conversation. Like, think of this as a journey. That's how you make relationships that last.
Totally. A question just came in. What strategies do you use when looking to network in a field of work you have never been in before? How do you find people you want to connect with in university when you aren't in the workforce?
So, you know, there's some awesome examples in here because I've had to build a network totally from new. So that is in here. Page 26, because I know we had a question on building a new business and stuff. Page 26, my friend Jennifer Johnson's case study where she had to build a whole new line of business and knew no one. You know, this is sort of like identifying if you know of a particular industry you want to get in, like think about, all right, the people in this, it's almost like lean startup. Who's my ideal customer? Who are the ideal people I want to connect with who might be doing my kind of job? All right, if I was that person, what are the clubs? What are the organizations? What are the professional groups that are out there? How can I go and watch and observe or join and be part of what they're doing so I can start to learn and understand whether or not this is a career I want to have. You know, on the university level as a student, God, you get to be curious. You know, that's sort of, I miss those days, you know, and, you know, we're also fixated on getting a job. We forget that we can be curious and try other things. So if you're not being curious in the classes you're taking so that you're getting a diverse, different thinkers that you're hanging out with, I mean, I might have a degree in poli-sci, but, you know, I did enjoy my Russian cinematography and Russian literature classes immensely. But like go and find other clubs and groups, like diversify your network and be interested in what other people are doing. And that may unlock and open, you know, I would say career ideas for you.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question.
We kind of hit on that one. It's a read Jennifer's case study on page 26 and
yeah.
Think lean startup. Identify your customer. Who is that person? What do they care about? What are they doing? And that's where you will want to go and network and start building your, you know. I remember at an event where someone said, got up and spoke and said, here's my ideal customer. And I didn't have to say a thing, Ali. Someone else in the audience put up their hand and they said, I know exactly where your ideal customer is. And they all hang out at this not-for-profit. And your services in construction could really help us with our annual event. So I'll connect you, right? This guy didn't have to take, you know, go and network and work a room. He needed to go and volunteer and he would meet his ideal customer. So figure out who your ideal customer is and then think about where the ways they spend their time. And that's where you want to network.
There's one really good question in the chat that I thought would be really good, applicable. Is networking really that effective in the day and age of job search application websites? And I would say this applies whether you're looking for a job or not, but just within the day of internet and websites, when everything is so available online and just a click away.
You know why? Here's why. And had this absolute experience when I was at the university in St. Catharines doing an event, and the guy who I was doing the event with, who was an alum of that university, and he was a manager who was hiring, and he literally, as I talked about earlier, he had been handed by HR like a spreadsheet of qualified people. And here is a busy person who's trying to hire because he's shorthanded, and now he has to take time away and figure out, like, do I interview 100 people for one opening? And he was talking about his frustration of how actually having a personal recommendation, once someone was already pre-qualified through that online, he said how helpful that would be. And at the end of the event, one of the students came up to him and she put up her hand and she's like, I'm one of those people on the spreadsheet. I've never seen someone happier in their lives. Like all of a sudden they were like, she's on the spreadsheet. Maybe I found the perfect candidate and I'm not going to have to interview, you know, like anybody else, and I can be done with this process. So yes, relationships matter more than ever before. It's the way you can cut through all the noise. It's the way that this is not backdooring anything. This is you're getting your qualifications up front and up front and center. Also, there is studies in terms of job market that, you know, social skills are the thing we hire for and we're looking for more than anything else these days. So you can't, you know, kind of display your social skills by, you know, just hiding behind the computer and submitting things that way. You know, getting to know people who can recommend you for better opportunities is the way to go.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, that has flown by. Time has just gone by. I've learned so much and lots of nuggets there that are useful, I think, for people that are in all situations. Thank you so much for giving your time. I know this isn't the last time we're going to see you. Just for all of our registrants today, just a reminder that you will receive an email tomorrow with follow-up links from this session. One of these links will be for another, as I alluded to, series with Kelly that we're really excited to offer in July. Kelly has this amazing 30-day networking plan, and we'll offer alumni the chance to follow the plan and engage with her in a series of check-ins. So the link for more details on that will be in the chat and also in your inbox tomorrow. If you have any specific questions or other alumni initiatives, you can reach out to the alumni relations team via email at alumni@uvic.ca. And I know there was some chat about how you were getting your book. So if you are nervous about the address you put in your registration, please send a corrected mailing address to alumni@uvic.ca so you can get your book, because I already have mine, and trust me, you want to get this book, get all the case studies. So on behalf of the UVic Alumni Association, thank you to everybody who is here. Thank you so much, Kelly, and to the alumni relations team and our tech team for putting on this virtual event. And yeah, I just want to say thank you, Kelly. And do you have any last words?
Thank you. You are just like kick-ass moderator. It has been such a pleasure to get to know you and have this fun together. Looking forward to doing this again, and looking forward to seeing everybody for, you know, 2 dates in July and 1 in August with that 30-day networking plan.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Kelly. And thank you everyone for being here.